3 Lives 3 Worlds. The Pillow Book. Lower volume. Original work by Tanki Gongzi. English translation, Hamster 428. English editing, Rock Harlequin, Lily, Joanna Kuang. Part 4 The Shadow's Souls. Chapter 12. Fengju had learned many subjects as part of her formative education. The school had taught everything there was to teach, hence she had also studied Buddhism and Daoism. In her belief, harmony was most important. For example, if there was heaven, then there was earth, this was a kind of harmony. If there were men, then there were women, this was also a kind of harmony. Zais left, then Sumoy returned, this was yet another kind of harmony. At the time Mo Xiao suddenly appeared in the pavilion, Fengju was clambering over the fence to feed the fish. When she heard a sound behind her, she casually glanced back. Upon catching Sumoy's appearance, she shuddered and almost fell down from the fence. Presently, the West Sea's most refined and charming second prince, Sumoy, was sporting a head of disheveled hair and a pair of bloodshot eyes. He held a large bowl in his hand as he poured himself some tea. There was a moment of silence. Fengju pinched herself to see whether she was dreaming or not, then came closer and dubiously asked, "Mo Xiao, from the way you look, don't tell me you broke into someone's daughter's bedchamber last night and got chased by her father with a stick." Sumoy placed the bowl down and gave her a glance. His eyes were full of resentment and grief. "Zais invited me to the Holy Palace so that I could help him make a magical object. When it was most critical, you had Cha-Cha bring toffee foxes or whatever they were to him. He received the damn things and tossed everything to me without even a word. After he went down, he never came back. I'm so exhausted. Right now, my hands are stiff. Even my face is stiff." When he saw her surprised expression, he sighed and said, "I'm not saying this to blame you, but you need to be understanding. This appearance of mine is directly caused by the many days of exhaustion and sleeplessness. It's really to the West Sea's blessings and my own resilient life that I even have enough breath to talk to you right now." Fengju did have a moment of shock, but it had little to do with guilt. She was only sighing at Zai's eagerness to show gratitude. Now seeing Mo Xiao's dispirited face, inexplicable sympathy rose from within as she tried to comfort him. "You know, Zais is a grateful person, and you did him such a big favor. After the magical object is finished, I wonder how he's going to repay you. Just thinking about it makes me excited." She seemed to be truly excited as she spoke these words. "Then again, you're not missing any treasures, nor do you care for beautiful women. I bet he will choose a more sincere repayment worthy of your friendship, such as personally cooking a meal for you." Daijun's cooking was a highly mysterious and a highly dangerous thing. Liansong's regretful lament rang in his ears. The teacup could not help but clatter a bit in Mo Xiao's hand. He said, "If he can't think of any ways to repay me, don't ever remind him." He saw puzzlement appear on Fengju's face and added deadpan, "Doing a good deed each day is a West Sea house rule. We never ask for repayment. If we help others just for the hope of receiving repayments, we are doing nothing more than taking advantage of the wretched. I'll only be despised by my clansmen." Fengju suddenly understood. In her eyes was an appreciative expression. Mo Xiao coughed and quickly changed topics. "Let's put this aside for now. I'm back this time to pick up a few things from the royal palace and also to ask you, has everything been alright in the past few days over at Chen Yi's place? What was considered alright, and what was not? Feng Zhu pondered on this. Chen Yi had been quietly imprisoning himself in Mengchun Manor for the past several days. He was so quiet that if Mo Xiao didn't remind her, she would have forgotten her estate was housing such a great deity. In her mind, that was quite all right. But she didn't know whether this was Mo Xiao's definition of all right or not. She ambiguously asked, "He didn't come to bother me, that should be all right, right?" Mo Xiao laughed, but there wasn't a smile in his expression. Of course, it was a bit difficult to see a smile from his face right now. He would not have had to bother you first. He was this way to Arania in the past, and he'd be just the same to you now. This brought back some of Feng Zhu's curiosity. I've also heard that Chen Yi, because of Arania, had rid 3 of the seasons with a slash of his sword. This was a prevalent rumor, so he must have had mutual affection for her. Everything happens for a reason, though. I don't think this mutual affection was born out of thin air only after Arania died. You told me half of their past last time, do you wish to tell me the other half today? Moi half leaned against the back of his chair and gazed to the lush lotus leaves in the distant lake and said, "The other half? I don't know much either. There was but a thing or two that could be proven." Then he said, "Where was I last time?" Chen Yi knew his letters were penned by Arania, went to her study, and then said some severing words to her. Feng Zhu sighed regretfully. Strangers, enemies, arch-nemeses, he said these were the only possibilities between them. Mo Xiao sneered, he ought to have remembered this sentence the rest of his life and adhere to his words. To Arania, that would have been a blessing. The pavilion momentarily fell into silence. At length, Moi quietly said, "Among the thousands of living things in this world, I've only seen such blitheness once in all my life from Arania." Some of Arania's blitheness could be seen after her severance with Chen Yi in the study. It was normal for any other woman, if not quite in tears all day long, to at least be locked inside her bedchamber heartbroken for several days if she was told such harsh words by her crush. Arania's behavior, however, had seemed as though nothing had happened that day inside the study. No longer needing to change her ways in consideration for Chen Yi, her days passed by increasingly leisurely. Apart from her usual calligraphy practice and opera attendance, incidentally, the archery teacher at the Royal Academy had gone home for a visit and she thus came to school as his substitute for a few days. She left each day when the sun rose and came back when it set. She was able to live with Chen Yi, who was suffocating inside Mengchun Manor, in peace this way. Because she was substituting at the Royal Academy, she often ran into Wen Tian hurrying along with a textbook in her sleeves. Wen Tian was just like her namesake in her tranquil temperament. After school, she did not hang out with any of her colleagues, living her life in an orderly way. She had been feeling apologetic toward Wen Tian since a few days ago. She could imagine she'd be burying her face in a pile of books, then sit around some more even at home. Reckoning that she must be bored, now and again she asked the kitchen to prepare another pair of chopsticks and brought Wen Tian home for dinner. Wen Tian loved chess almost to an obsession. She had once had the chance to play with Chen Yi. Although Arania didn't know how their game panned out that day, it seemed to be an unforgettable game from the way Wen Tian had looked. Finally, on the third time she brought Wen Tian back, the scholar hesitated for a period of time, then cautiously inquired whether it would be possible for her to come to Mengchun Manor and learn a few things from Chen Yat. Needless to say, she agreed. Wen Tian's face was filled with gratitude. Thereafter, Scholar Wen regularly visited Mengchun Yuan. On the first few days, the old steward oftentimes came to report the hour on which Scholar Wen arrived at the manor and the hour on which she left, what she said to Chen Yat, and how many games they played. Once, he added with concern that although he could see Chen Yat wasn't particularly warm, he was at least willing to regard Scholar Wen favorably. Then, would it be all right to continue letting this scholar into Mengchun Manor? Arania smiled and looked to her steward, then said, "It's good to have a friend who shares your hobby. Your following them around like that is enough for people to lose interest. What His Excellency the Archmage wants to do is his own business. He has met with misfortunes this time. We opened our door to help him, not to imprison him. I seem to recall having mentioned these words to you before." The old steward received this admonition and returned to seriously ponder on it. When he caught on, he wanted to sew his mouth shut. However, the old steward had been by Arania's side his entire life. He was like a loyal child. In his mind, even though Her Highness seemed to hint that he no longer needed to report to her Chen Yi's business in the future, he felt he should still report what ought to be reported. For example, Lord Chen Yi had been playing chess with Scholar Wen to a trance these days. This needed to be reported. The steward's old heart was like a spider carefully weaving its webs. Noting that although Chen Yi was often spacing out these days, he didn't always space out. Only when he played chess at Boxen Pavilion or at the miniature stone forest did Chen Yi go into a trance. He was often staring out to the armosia tree beside the pavilion. From what the steward saw, there wasn't anything particularly mystifying about the tree. It just looked fairly handsome now that it was grown, and its sturdy trunk happened to be missing a length of bark. He recalled that this tree might have had a line or two of Arania's inscription on it before. The miniature stone forest in Mengchun Manor was where Arania used to practice archery. Its stone formation was arranged in a solitary open space. On breezy days, playing chess here could bring peace to one's heart and mind. In Scholar Wen's hand was a chess stone. Her beauty was exceptionally serene and elegant. Those who didn't know would probably think Chen Yi was watching Scholar Wen into a daze. But who was the old steward? He, of course, perceived Chen Yi's eyes sweeping past Scholar Wen's head and focusing on the boulder behind her. On the boulder were a few lines as follows: "I cannot banish my sorrowful longing, so there is no point in hastening it away." The many changes in this ephemeral existence are but predetermined fate at play. This sorrow and grief, this worry and fear, all shall in due course go on their way. Although there was no signature left behind, the steward knew whose handwriting it was. There was only Arania who loved to write calligraphy in this estate. But seriously writing with brushes and papers wasn't to her liking. On a whim, she would pick up any random object and draw a few strokes wherever she might be. In the past, she had also properly signed her name under each inscription. But eventually her writing became too prolific and she didn't bother to sign any more. The loyal steward kept what he saw in mind, then taking advantage of Arania's good mood one day, he unstitched his sewn mouth and brought up the matter. Evenly, Arania continued her writing. She smiled with a sigh. I had once deceived him. It's no surprise he would be angry when he saw my words. Why must you arrange the chess games in those places? The ink flowing from her brush became thicker. But there aren't many places in Mengchun Manor with my inscriptions either. If he really dislikes them, please see to it that they are taken care of. If they were carved on trees, you can strip off the bark. If they were carved in stone, then chisel them out. Arania made it sound so easy, but the old steward was reluctant about removing those inscriptions. There was a small part of him that thought Arania might have been wrong. Then he thought, even if she wanted to, Chen Ye hadn't said he disliked them himself. He wanted to hear from him directly before he decided whether they should be removed or kept. There had also been a lot of things going on these past few days. Although Chen Yi's detainment to the princess's estate to make a lapis mirror for Crown Prince Yehua was a sentence in pretext, efforts on every facade had already been made. A room had long been prepared in Mengchun Manor for Chen Ye. Days had been spent on collecting the required materials. Everything had been found by now, and they were only waiting to start the furnace to smelt the glass. On one of Wen Tian's visits to Arania's, she said she had heard some rumors relating to Chen Yi's mirror making and wanted to come along for learning experience. He would need someone to help, so she volunteered, asking the princess to give her this chance. Arania gave it to her. Simoy tapped the rim of his cup and said to her, "It seems Scholar Wen has really fallen for Chen Ye. I really admire your generosity in granting her whatever she asks for." Arania leaned over and poured him more tea. Chen Ye has his own choice in love, it's not his fault that he didn't choose me. Did you think I'd become a hateful villain out of jealousy? She then said, half of the hatred in this world stems from nothing more than the idea itself. I didn't think there was a reason to be resentful. Tonight was an opportunity that hadn't presented itself before. Giving him this romance required little effort on my part. How can we even mention it as generosity? At length, Simoy replied, I didn't think you would be the resentful type, but it's still hard to avoid being bothered by these things. I was just wondering, if ever you became resentful because of him one day, for what reason would it be? Arania turned the cup in her palm. Then it must be because he was once mine to have. Let's say for example he fell in love with me, then didn't love me anymore and fell for someone else instead. She went on as she laughed, a girl's idea of love is as vague as dust, you might barf if you listen to it. Here, drink some tea for a second. Simoy gazed to the inside of his cup. There are major things in this world, and there are also trivial ones. Whether big or small, they are all difficult to sever. Heaven's Crown Prince Yehua and High Deity Bai Qian's love story, for example, should not be underestimated. Teacher, you're right, but my problem is barely real. I've never even thought about it. Mortal wise men of the past advised that nothing in this world was absolute, they must have been talking about this. Immortals only boasted of their long age that they never tried to understand heaven's will until they were met with disappointment. Immortals aren't just those born to the deity clan. Whether demons or humans, all must sever their 6 desires and 7 emotions in order to attain divinity. Once they rid of their desires, there wasn't anything left to be disappointed about. So most of the gods were actually inferior to the humans if one were to speak of the unknown. The archery teacher had returned, bringing with him many souvenirs from his hometown in profuse gratitude to Aranya. No longer having to come to school, she spent a few idle days at her estate. Occasionally, she took a few books out to Lake Pavilion to enjoy the breeze. When she reached the lakeside, she encountered Chen Ye and Wen Tian heading back. She didn't avoid them nor did she hide. She continued walking past them. Wen Tian greeted her with a smile, she also smiled back. Chen Ye looked at her in silence. 2 steps past them, she turned her head and said, "Yesterday my steward said you wanted a special material to make the mirror pieces of stone from Mount Qinan, I seem to recall. They haven't collected everything for you. Steward soon knows of the various materials, but they'll still need you to come and pick them out yourself. I've let His Majesty know. I'll be going to see Zeiss the day after tomorrow, are you going to join me? Are you doing this as a favor to me because you think of me as a caged bird that's being trapped so pitifully?" said Chen Ye, coldly. Aranya raised her book to block the sunlight and replied, "If you say it's a favor, then let's consider it a favor." Trying to smooth things over, Wen Tian offered, "Can I come along, too? Outsiders normally cannot enter Mount Qinan without permission from His Majesty, but I really want to visit it this once." The other 2 were still locked in a stare-down with neither conceding even an inch. "Of course Wen Tian will come with us," Chen Ye replied. Aranya was a little surprised. She smiled and said, "That's fine with me. Having Wen Tian will prevent the 2 of us from starting a fight along the way." 2 days later. Behind Qinan Mountain, Chinese parasol trees cast their shadows in the sun, bamboos rustled in the light breeze. Aranya brought along a basket filled with assorted homemade pastries. She peacefully sat in the open space outside of the bamboo cottage and waited for Zeiss to complete his pranayama and open the door to welcome in his guests. Chen Ye coldly glanced to the basket beside her, then, without a word, went ahead into the quarry with Wen Tian. Zeiss' pranayama continued to noon. As he opened his door, he yawned and leaned against the fences in his fluttering white robe and said to her, "You got here so soon. Oh, and you brought cakes for me too." Aranya carried the basket over and greeted him. "You wrote that you've caught a Quinyan beast to help me practice my archery. You knew I'd be coming to visit within 2 days at the latest, yet you shut that door the entire morning. I was beginning to think you didn't want to see me." These were her words, but her face was lit with some interest. "Where's the Quinyan beast right now?" Zeiss received the basket and turned around, walking as he told her, "You scared me with that zombie look when you first arrived. Obviously, I couldn't let you in lest you give me bad luck. You're finally looking alive again. It would have been better had you looked alive sooner, though. It's not often you come here to see me, can't you brighten up a bit?" Aranya sighed, "My spirits haven't been great these days, but surely, I can't resemble a zombie just yet. Did you make me stand outside boiling half a day in the sun to help me absorb some vitality?" Zeiss plopped a piece of pastry into his mouth. "What else could it be for?" He raised his head. A stone forest was emerging behind the dissipating fog. It was dense with erratic stone peaks. In the sky above was a ring of encircling violet light. They could faintly hear the roar of some strange beast. He seemed to find this sound pleasing to the ears. After listening to it for a while, he said, Because this Quinyan beast kept causing trouble year after year, I was bothered to go catch it. It is the most agile out of all the exotic animals, and it's also insensitive to pain, so it's very suitable for you to practice your shooting. If you can shoot it, you'll be able to shoot anything in Fanyan Valley. Aranya conjured a bow from her sleeve and smilingly said, "Let me go meet him." The Quinyan beast was a prehistoric four-horned animal. Its temperament was as ferocious as its looks, it could only be described as fierce. Aranya raised the Jianshi bow and flew into the stone maze. Because the Quinyan beast had been starved by Zeiss for days, the smell of human excited its senses. Even though it didn't have enough strength due to hunger, its claws were sharper than usual, and its body was also more alert. It was hard to blame the beast for risking its life to feed itself. Aranya used the stone boulders as shields and held her breath as she kept her distance from the Quinyan beast. Wingless arrows pierced through the air, but before they could reach its body, it had smartly escaped. From outside, Zeiss at length called in, "You won't hit it if you aim for it. None of the things you used to shoot was faster than your arrows, but the Quinyan beast will always be faster. It'd do you better to calculate the speed of your arrows, then calculate the speed at which the beast moves and shoot at askew." Zeiss had his point, but it was easier said than done. What he said meant that Aranya would need to do three things. First, she'd have to hide from the Quinyan beast to avoid being caught and devoured by it. Second, she'd have to immediately make an accurate estimation to raise her bow. Third, she'd need to observe and grasp its habits and movements. They'd been in the maze for half an hour, but neither was able to gain the upper hand. One could imagine how angry the Quinyan beast was, not being able to enjoy the meal that was right in front of its eyes. Zeiss stood to the side of the stone forest and said while sipping his tea, "Do try to come out soon. It's quite normal to not be able to shoot him within an hour. If you got eaten because you were tired, what would I say to your teacher?" His voice had barely landed when the Quinyan beast's enraged roar was heard reverberating from within the stone formation. The maiden in red had pushed herself from a stone pillar into the air and released a well-calculated arrow. It was aimed at the four-horned beast's abdomen, a terrific aim and exceptionally accurate. Her tranquil eyes betrayed a trace of delight. She planned on landing and quickly retreating from the formation. Tragedy, however, fell at this very moment. The second she landed, not noticing a bunch of loquat pits on the ground, she lost her footing and fell straight down, then knocked her forehead on a nearby stalagmite. It all happened in a flash. The furious Quinyan beast was ready to pounce over. Flapping wings suddenly sounded in the empty sky. Like overcast clouds, black feathers obscured the light of day. A blade thrust into the surging beast's chest and drove it into the side of a stone pillar. Everything happened in a split second. The black-robed man's eyes were as fathomless as an abyss. He made a seal from his palm. Behind the silver light, the erratic stones in the forest rumbled and began to move. Comfortable now that it had broken free from the blade, the Quinyan beast roared in desire to pass through the stone formation. Because the formation was mobilized by Chen Yat, it wasn't as careless and loose as it had been. The Quinyan beast was pinned in place. Nevertheless, it wasn't going to be easy for the two of them to leave the maze. There was only a small opening between them and the Quinyan beast in the southwest corner. Aranya clutched the bleeding wound on her forehead and foggily regarded him as though she still hadn't figured out why he would suddenly appear. What other thoughts would she have at this critical moment? Chen Ye held Arania and pressed her injured head against his chest. Black wings tightly enclosed the two of them. They struggled through the nearest rocks in front of the beast, their pressing bodies rolling over to the most vulnerable spot of the force field. Once they got out of the formation, Zeiss immediately reinforced the force field. His gaze fell upon Chen Ye as he said to him in commendation, "It's been a while. You're much more composed on the battlefield compared to before." He then added, "You had always loved putting on that cold face and ignoring other people when you were young. How come you haven't changed at all after growing up? How can you let her fight the Quinyan beast knowing it's so dangerous?" Chen Ye replied, rather stoically. "Didn't she hit it, though?" If not for the sudden fall, he guiltily scratched his head. "Ah, it's all my fault. I took a stroll in the maze yesterday and peeled some loquats," then he at once said in sternness, "but real battlegrounds are all like this. No one will be there to help her clean loquat pits. She'll just have to be careful herself." That was precisely my lesson to her. Arania lay in Chen Yi's arms. After a while, she interrupted, "I don't think anyone would be eating loquats on the battlefield, so there's no need to worry about this." Chen Ye stared at Zeiss. There was no trace of warmth in his eyes. "When she was in danger, what were you doing?" "She's your wife." Zeiss at once seemed ridden with guilt. "I was eating the cakes she brought for me, so I wasn't paying attention," but he instantly turned stern. "What, just because we performed nuptial rites we're supposed to be husband and wife? That may be everyone's narrow-minded view, but Arania and I don't feel the same way. Besides, weren't you faster than me in your rescuing of her? Wouldn't anything I might have done have been unnecessary?" Chen Yi's expression frosted up like a block of ice. "If I hadn't been fast, her arm would have been bitten off by the beast." Zeiss said in bewilderment, "She's the one whose arm could have been bitten off. If she's not questioning me, why are you questioning me?" Chen Yi's hand was still covering Arania's bleeding forehead. A curious look spread on her face as she played along with Zeiss. "That's a really good question. I'd also like to know." Chen Ye looked down at her for the first time. The blood on her forehead had stained his hand. Contemptuously, he had once said these things weren't clean, but he was letting them dirty his fingers this time. He did not withdraw his hand. In his eyes was a flash of something resembling struggle. Arania softly asked him, "Chen Ye, do you like me? How dare you?" She brushed aside his fingers that were pressing on her forehead. There was a trace of anger in his voice. "Can you stay still?" She laughed. "You really do like me, Chen Ye?" His fingers again draped over her forehead. He pressed his lips together and did not speak, but she was the sole image which existed in his eyes. Her condition had seemed to him so serious. Like an otherworldly being who had broken through a snowy fortress. Aside from her smile, behind him would be an eternal sky filled with scattering snow. But even that was difficult enough. She cheered up and reached her hand out to poke at his chin. "It doesn't matter if you won't admit to it. I have a headache, show me a smile." He continued holding her. He let her play with his chin but slightly lowered his gaze to her. "Do you want to die?" She gave him a faint smile. "Has anyone ever pinched your chin like me?" He was still looking at her in the same way, waiting for her hand to pull away. "What do you think?" He should have been angry, but he didn't sound angry in the least. When Wen Tian rushed over to offer a silk handkerchief, her hand froze midair as her face paled in color. Zeiss plopped a piece of cake into his mouth, glanced at the sky, coughed and concluded, "Those who need to find a bed for the injured should go find a bed, those who need to cook should go cook. Why is everyone standing around here?" Regarding the question of whether Chen Ye had liked Urania or not, Feng Zhu had perspired cold sweat when she listened to the first half of their past from Mo Xiao. At this time, it was as if a boulder had suddenly sunk into the deep abyss and left a loud boom behind her. What was rising was her floating belief. She was both pleased and relieved. But while listening to Mo Xiao speak of the Quinyin beast, she also wondered whether, in order to satisfactorily sing this show with Chen Ye, she would also need to meet the legendary Quinyin beast living behind Qinan Mountain. Her scalp was prickly when she thought of this. But for Urania and Chen Ye, it should have been a moving incident that brought the two of them together. Her previous worries were quietly drowned out. She was fated to have a doomed love, her path wasn't lined with roses. Because she sincerely sympathized with Urania, she had hoped her fate would be a little smoother. This outcome was to her satisfaction. She asked if he wanted another cup of tea. Simoy glanced at her, a faint smile appearing on his disconsolate face. That smile for a moment chilled her to the bones. Feng Zhu shivered and was reminded that this man sitting across from her was nicknamed God of 1,000 Faces. The 1,000-faced deity's fingers lightly tapped on the table. "I know what you're thinking. You feel that this was a happy ending, don't you?" He gazed to the lake in the distance. It wasn't an ending at all. There were many other things that happened afterwards, but only one could be regarded as good. He paused, then went on, "Zeiss is really quite honorable. Although this marriage was meaningless to him, he never once over the years submitted a memorial to ask for a divorce. He had pitied Urania for being a scorned princess. As his wife, her days were finally getting better. Since that day behind Qinan Mountain, Chen Ye and Urania stayed together for 2 years more. I'm not sure what was there between the two of them. At that time, I had returned to the West Sea. All I know is that Chen Ye was still living in confinement at Urania's estate in those 2 years. Feng Zhu inwardly wondered to herself. Mo Xiao said he had business and was called back to the West Sea, an excuse one couldn't deny. But could it be that when he finally came to understand what Urania meant to him, unfortunately, the person he loved had already found someone else? Because of his heartache, Mo Xiao had returned to the West Sea. Now that she knew, Feng Zhu tried her best to choose her words. "I guess it can't be helped that you don't know everything which had happened. But you just said there were many bad things that transpired, what were they?" Simoy was lost in thought for a time. At last, he said, "According to history records, King Xiongli Ke died from illness 2 years later. Crown Prince Xiongli he inherited the throne. His accession was on the 24th of July, exactly on the birth of the Nagarjuna Bodhisattva. He had only been on the throne for 7 days when the neighboring Owl clan condemned the Bayani Owl clan's condoning of transboundary hunting and sent troops to wage war. Xiongli he personally undertook the expedition and drove the Owl clan beyond the Silver River. On August 17, Xiongli he died in battle. Xiongli he was childless, and, according to the order of succession to the throne, if Junyo wasn't demoted into a commoner, she would be next in line, followed by Aranya and Changde. On August 19, the exiled Junyo was welcomed back into the imperial city to succeed to the throne. The next day, Aranya hanged herself. Fengju was astounded. Sumoy added, perhaps because Aranya had turned to dust, and according to the Bianiaos, hanging was indeed a good way to obliterate someone's soul, they therefore had the bravado to use it to deceive me. Fengju calmed down for a moment. She frowningly said, I've heard that after Aranya passed away, the succeeding queen immediately ordered for her name to be classified as a forbidden word. I have some questions. Did the clan actually allow Junyo to bypass Aranya to the throne? They also kept insisting that Aranya hanged herself, but they didn't give you a reason for her hanging? And why should Junyo ban Aranya's name from being spoken? There were rumors, said Mo Shao expressionlessly, that rather than dying from illness, Shang Jun had actually been poisoned by Aranya. He brought his gaze back to Fengju. Of course, if this was the case, the questions you raised wouldn't be perplexing. But do you believe this rumor? Fengju instinctively shook her head. She asked in sudden recollection, what about Chen Yat? Sumoy sneered, Chen Yat? It was rumored that after Shang Jun passed away, he was again welcomed back into Qinan Palace. Aranya was imprisoned because of the king's death. He once submitted a memorial. Fengju's heart abruptly sank. What was written in it? A glacier seemed to have formed from the icy smile in Mo Shao's eyes. The memorial had requested for Aranya's case to be moved to the Holy Palace, saying that since she was guilty of such a serious felony, she ought to be executed by the shrine. There was a long pause. The next day, Aranya committed suicide. End of chapter 12.